We'll begin our look at teine, kudaketa nihongo. Teine being polite Japanese, and kudaketa, or broken down, so to speak, nihongo. The difference between the styles of speech when speaking with someone with whom you're not on a first name basis with, somebody whom you're not friends with or very tight with, versus people whom you are, family, friends, and so on. It's worth noting here before we dive in that no one's ever going to fault you or be upset if you use polite Japanese when polite Japanese isn't called for. Someone may simply tell you, you don't need to be so formal, relax a bit, something like that. However, conversely, if you say or use informal Japanese with someone with whom you should not use it, it can get you into a little bit of trouble. Speaking informally to someone who is your social superior or organizationally superior, could land you in a bit of trouble. So do keep that in mind as we move forward and look at how to speak informal Japanese. One big difference you'll notice right away if you're listening in on conversations or if you watch a lot of Japanese media is you don't hear hai and ie very often. Hai and ie, yes and no respectively, are very formal, almost rigid ways of answering a question. When you're speaking with friends and family, there's no need to use hai or ie when responding to questions. In fact, there are informal versions of yes and no. We have these in English, so to speak. We can say yup for yes and nope for no. In keeping with this idea of formal versus informal, keep in mind that you probably wouldn't use yup or nope with your boss at work. Similarly, you shouldn't use the informal versions of yes and no with social or organizational superiors again. So keep that in mind. How do we pronounce these? Yes in Japanese, or let's say yup rather, is pronounced un. Nope in Japanese is pronounced with a rising intonation on that second u syllable. Here's how it sounds. So it's 3 syllables. Count of 3 syllables. For nope. Another big difference has to do with the use of des in our communication. A small confession here. If you had me for first semester Japanese 1510 in the fall, you may recall that I explained des when we went over that topic in class as basically equivalent to is or am or are. It was an expedient way to help you wrap your mind around the way Japanese grammar is set up in a way that sort of made sense or sort of mirrored or echoed the way we do it in English. Strictly speaking, though, des does not mean is or am or are. Strictly speaking, des is a copula, a word that's used to describe the state of being of the subject of a clause. In Japanese, it's added after nouns and adjectives to make a sentence polite. So basically, its only function is to ensure that a sentence is properly polite. Therefore, if we are going to look at and learn how to express ourselves informally in Japanese, we have to do away with des. My sincerest apologies for the misinformation. Wink, wink. So, no more des. Formal versus informal. Here, if you want to make something informal, and formerly it had des on it, just lose the des, get rid of it. So, the sentence, I am a student, watashi wa gakusei desu, informally becomes, watashi wa gakusei. End of sentence. This sentence, watashi wa gakusei, is a little stunted, so in reality we should probably use da instead of des here. When you want your sentence to have a little more oomph, a little more emphasis, add da. Watashi wa gakusei is watashi wa gakusei da. Understood to mean, I'm a student. This removal of des, this leaving off of des, also extends to negative versions of sentences. If you want to say, I'm not a student, drop the des. Gakusei janai desu. Informally, if we remove the des, simply becomes gakusei janai. Gakusei janai. I'm not a student. This also works for adjective sentences. Remove the des from atsui desu, it's hot. You're left with a single word sentence in Japanese. How's the weather out there? Atsui. It's hot. Another example with an E adjective. あの家は怖いです。あの家は怖いです. That house is scary. To make the informal version of this sentence, that house is scary, all we have to do is remove des. That leaves us with あの家は怖い。あの家は怖い. What about verbs? So recall that in polite, formal Japanese, verbs always end with ma and su, mas, tabemasu, nomimasu, shimasu, and so on. To make this sentence, I will play video games. テレビゲームをします. テレビゲームをします. To make this sentence into its informal version, we're just going to use the short, or what we've also called the dictionary form of the verb. This is the form you'll find it in when you look it up in a dictionary. Therefore, I will play video games. Saying the same sentiment, the same sentence to a friend or someone who's close to you would be phrased thus. テレビゲームをする. テレビゲームをする. Let's look at another example using an affirmative sentence. アイスクリームを食べます. アイスクリームを食べます. I will eat ice cream. I will eat ice cream. Again, to make this into its informal version, we're going to use just the dictionary form of 食べます. The dictionary form, the short version of 食べます, recall, is 食べる. So, to tell a friend or family member that you're going to have some ice cream, you would simply say, アイスクリームを食べる. アイスクリームを食べる. So what happens when we're using a negative? What's the short version of a negative version of a verb? Recall in Japanese that the negative endings of verbs, instead of being mas, are ma-sen, masen, tabemasen, nomimasen, etc. What then would the short negative version of this be? Well, there's some new grammar here that comes in, and that's the short negative version of the verb. The informal version of tabemasen is, in fact, as you'll see here, 食べない. 食べない. So to say, I will not eat ice cream to a friend or a family member, we would need to say, アイスクリームを食べない. アイスクリームを食べない. Mainly then, the big differences between formal and informal Japanese is that if a sentence has a noun or an adjective, take the des off and you've got an informal version. For affirmative verbs, you'll use the dictionary form, but where negative forms of verbs are concerned, we need to look at this new conjugation paradigm, how to make short negative verbs. We'll look at that next.